Liberation, distinction, and imprisonment. The Japanese have a tradition when making pottery. They try and make the perfect pot and then they mark it with an imperfection. They try and rake the perfect garden and then shake the tree so that a few dead leaves fall upon it. And this holds space for the unknown guest, the unexpected visitor, the doorway through which the light and life energy of reality comes in and liberates the trapped energy that entered the circle, the shape, and then needs to leave again. Much like the energy that enters the body, synergizes and processes through the brain as consciousness, and then leaves, releasing into a larger pattern. One of the ways to look at physicality or look at reality is as overlapping patterns of energy, which in their most ephemeral density of thought are possibilities. As they get overlaid with the density of emotion generated by those thoughts, they become probabilities. Probabilities because there has been no human action in human history that was not foundationed on the biology released by emotion, and then overlaid again in that possibility field, that probability field, the intersection between what's possible and what's probable, and what's going on right now, the various environmental forces that induce a reality out of a probability. It gets one octave lower, one layer of density thicker, and it becomes visible to the crudest of all perceptions, our five senses. And there's a doorway and a possibility of looking at reality as the five senses being a gateway, a way out of the dark. But there's another way of looking at the body and the five senses. And that's to imagine a void, a pattern, a system of unimaginable complexity. And a tiny little piece of that pattern gets wrapped in a crypt, gets wrapped up in layer after layer after layer of duct tape, of enclosure. And then, having completely blotted out the light, 5 little holes are placed so that that captured piece of light, that captured piece of energy, has 5 little holes through which to relate to the self it was, to the other, that it will be again as soon as the duct tape is unwrapped. But while it is wrapped, and while the senses are blocked, there is a sense of isolation, a sense of separation that lasts only as long as the duct tape membrane lasts. And those most joyful moments of all, as the duct tape frays and wears away and erodes and gets battered with UV radiation. And one day it cannot contain the fragment. The duct tape falls aside. And now, rather than the 5 little pinpricks, rather than the little dots in a mask, the illusion of the separate self returns again into the fabric, into the totality of all that is. And in this paradigm, the body is the prison, is the prism through which the unending patterns of light get refracted and cohesed into a version of reality that only exists as long as the observing and measuring devices of the organism called the body exist to capture that light. So it can go both ways. And what I'm touching on and alluding to is the fact that any system is by its nature, the nature of form, is to imprison or capture energy and light into a very specific journey that is defined by the form. It's very much like water, the ocean of water. And you take 3,000 gallons of that water and you siphon it off. And you put it into a big tank, a 3,000 gallon tank. You attach a pipe at the bottom of the tank. And you're the plumber. If you know anything about PVC, it's typically 33 degrees, 45 degrees, sometimes 22 degrees, 90s. And there's sections of pipe, so you can cut a 2-foot section of pipe and then put a 33-degree angle on it, and it goes off this way, and then you catch a 90-degree angle and run it uphill, and then do another 90 and comes over, and then it comes down and it goes over here, and then some of it sprays off in this nozzle here called irrigation, and another bit sprays off in this nozzle here, and another bit auto balances, the water level of a water feature that's evaporating. And the water goes in to the container and it comes out. However, the plumber has designed the pipe. If 6-inch pipe is used, it rushes through. If a nice gentle sweep and straight out, it goes through easily and quickly, and the journey is over in a moment. But as with much of what is considered great literature, the energy that comes in doesn't just rush through in a page. So-and-so was born. They opened their eyes. They lived their life and they died. The end. Great literature, as it is defined, is the torturous journey of the energy that comes in at the beginning of the page until finally, through all kinds of surprise turns in this, a journey in which every single page reveals another dimension, another relationship, another nuance of that energy with itself, with the world, with other versions of that energy called other characters. And finally, as we've hung on to every word in a well-written book. Who's the villain? Why did they do it? Why can't they see this? As we've followed the torturous route, finally the energy releases in some degree of satisfaction. And we have literature. Now, the paradigm that I'm working with here is the paradigm of paradigms and structures as traps and as doorways to liberation. If we imagine electricity running through a wire, and we take a little bit of that electricity, we run it into a coil, round and round and round, hundreds of times, and we continue. Well, sometimes we get light. Sometimes we get heat. Sometimes we get electromagnetic energy. We take something that is effortless and we build our awareness of that something by the torturous route, by the pattern of interruption, of resistance and friction, and we become conscious. The invisible electricity starts giving off heat and becomes visible to the skin, or starts giving off light and becomes visible to the eye, or starts creating a hum and becomes visible to the ear, or starts pulling things and becomes visible to the body. Why is my hand drawn magnetically towards this pattern? And in this way, we become conscious of energy. Every system of energy is a liberation and a prison. Every word is a liberation or a prison. Every paradigm, every concept is the scientific paradigm, the scientific method. Is it a doorway into revealing patterns of energy, patterns of relationship, corollary relationships? Every time we put 2 and 2, we have this new thing called 4. And again, 2 and 2 and 4. And sometimes when you put 2 of these things and 2 of these things, you have 5. You have synergy. You have light. It's not just a battery and a tube and a light bulb and some wire. You put it together and there's this new thing that happens. Light emerges in the alchemy of the relationship. Synergy. Within every paradigm, within every form, there is a prison. Because the form carries with it momentum, and the form of the human brain is an integrity-making machine. Meaning, when we cast the judgment on another, we are also, through the integrity-making machine of our brains, casting judgment on those parts of ourselves. When we cast judgment, this is bad in you. Well, there's always a little bit of you in me, and so this is also bad in me. And so we see the liberation, on the one hand, of what you're doing is causing me pain, and I don't like that. And if I can call it bad, then I don't have to deal with it anymore. I can just say, you're bad, and I don't like that, and some of the pain disappears. But at the same time, you're bad, now there's some part of me bad, and now I have to kind of apply that same logic. You deserve to be censored or punished. Now some part of me deserves to be censored or punished. Patterns are like algorithms in a computer. Patterns of thought, patterns of belief, paradigms. And they don't usually just apply in one area. If we give energy to them, they develop a momentum, and then they apply to those parts of ourselves. When we give them energy, they develop momentum. So this part of the object stands as a razor blade in the middle of energy. Liberation prison. Liberation prison. As soon as we enter form, as soon as we enter language, as soon as we enter structure, as soon as we enter belief, as soon as we enter matter, we have both prison and liberation as a probability field. And how we work with that, is largely the magic of which systems of energy we pump energy into, attention energy, and which systems of energy we pull energy out of and reallocate. So that the water that poured into the 3,000-gallon tank and then went this way and this way and this way and this way and this way, now gets poured into a 1,000-gallon tank and runs out like this into a beautiful rainbow arc. And the energy that used to pour here and here and here now runs out this way and waters the garden. Is it prison or prism? Liberation or entrapment? A lot of it depends on where we want to go and where we are. So it becomes very important, as in the language of truths, it becomes very important to understand that each truth is a journey, is a prism through which to see part of reality. That each truth is a paradox. The paradox of the body, is it a gateway through which to see reality? Or is it a 99% prison through which these tiny holes allow us to see a little part of the reality we saw in totality before we entered the door, before we entered the dark place? And then we're given these 5 little pinpricks to look back out at the light we once were, at the darkness we once were and still are, but have lost the memory. It's ultimately up to us to decide.